Good day, everyone. In behalf of my groupmates, I am Chris J. D. Rodrigo presenting this research proposal. Let me introduce to you our research team. Chris J. D. Rodrigo, Noraisa B. Harani, Marielle B. Condesa, Willie May M. Marsham. Here are the following presenters of each and every chapter of this research study. Noraisa B. Harani for the introduction of Chapter 1. Chapter 1 covers the background of the study, statement of the problem, significance of the study, hypothesis of the study, scope, and the limitation of the study. Chris J. D. Rodrigo will be presenting the review of related literature that covers the Chapter 2. So in the Chapter 2, we have the RRL, the grand synthesis, the theoretical framework, the conceptual framework, and the operational definition of terms. For the Chapter 3, which is the methodology, this will be presented by Marielle Condesa. So the Chapter 3 covers the local of the study, the research design, the respondents of the study, the sampling procedure, the instrumentation, data gathering procedure, and the data analysis. And lastly, for the presentation of the questionnaires, this will be facilitated by Willie May Martian. The title of this research proposal is The Perception of Teachers and Students in Science Experimental-Based Subjects During COVID-19 Pandemic.
Good day, everyone, and now I'm going to present to you the introduction. In the context of educational shift due to the ongoing pandemic and the cognizance of influences and consequences related in the experimental-based subjects in science. When COVID-19 pandemic came, the teaching and learning process changed immediately. So the teachers and students' lives have been affected, their study and learning have been challenged by shifting to online classes. But according to Maria et al. 2020, during COVID-19 pandemic outbreak and public lockout, all educators on all levels all over the world challenged to conduct classes online. In chemistry, science school teachers were in a particularly tough situation because they had to recognize teaching of not only theoretical knowledge but also practical aspects, and therefore they need to transfer experiments and laboratory activities to online environment. When COVID-19 pandemic declared, the World Organization in 2022 has effectively closed to the educational activities. Many schools affected and hundreds of millions of teachers and students around the world affected. In this situation, the learning of the teachers and students in science experimental based subjects does not show positive results in their education. But according to Maulana et al. 2015, although it is more cost-effective method, the reliability and variability of students' rating is to some extent compromised because students' evaluation usually reflect their expectation about the teachers. However, the COVID-19 pandemic has come that teaching style was changed to online lesson. Specifically, in experimental classes, had to redesign to achieve the best performance within imposed limitations. Therefore, the researchers have been compiled to know the perception of teachers and students in science experimental based subject during COVID-19 pandemic. Now I am going to present to you the statement of the problem. The aim of the study is to find out the perception of teachers and students in science experimental based subject in Western Philippines University, Puerto Princesa City, Aborlan, and Quezon campus. This is the question for the statement of the problem of the teachers. Number one, what is the profile of the teachers in Western Philippines University, Puerto Princesa City, Aborlan, and Quezon campus in terms of the following: name, sex, age, civil status, ISP, or Internet Service Provider, position, monthly salary, years in service, and gadgets. For the second statement of the problem is, what is the level of perception of the teachers towards the delivery of the lesson? For the third, what is the level of perception of the teachers towards the process discussion of lesson? For the fourth, what is the level of perception of the teachers towards the evaluation of lesson? For the fifth, is there a significant difference between the perception of teachers and students in science experimental based subjects? For the sixth, is there a significant relationship between the perception and demographic profile of the teachers? And next, this is the question for the statement of the problem for the demographic profile of the students. Number one, what is the profile of the students in Western Philippines University, Puerto Princesa City, Aborlan, and Quezon campus in terms of the following: name, sex, age, civil status, ISP, internet service provider, family monthly salary, campus, GWA, and gadgets. And the next question for the statement of the problem. Number two, what is the level of perception of the students towards the delivery of lessons? Number three, what is the level of perceptions of the students towards the process discussion of lessons? Number four, what is the level of perception of the students towards the evaluation of lessons? For the number five, is there a significant difference between the perception of teachers and students in science experimental based subjects? Number six, is there a significant relationship between the perception and demographic profile of the students? And now I'm going to discuss to you the hypothesis of the study. First, there is no significant difference between the perception of teachers and students in science experimental based subjects. The second, there is no significant relationship between the perception and demographic profile of teachers. And the last, there is no significant relationship between the perception demographic profile of the students. And for the significance of the study. This study provides information about the perception of the teachers and students in science experimental based subjects during COVID-19 pandemic. This study will be significant to the following: to the students, provide meaningful knowledge and understanding in perception on science experimental based subjects and important objectives and initiate students on how to learn and adjust for the new challenge in online class. And to the teachers, become knowledgeable on science experimental based subjects during online learning. And the teachers will guide students and will provide a good learning and strategy of teaching. To the schools, serve as a guide in finding out the issues and problems in perception of the teachers and students in science experimental based subjects during COVID-19 pandemic. And to the Department of Education, government, it will be helpful for the Education Department to further improve and empower the students' innovations in science experimental based subjects during COVID-19 pandemic. And to the researchers, allow them to gather a lot of information and serve as a guide with a similar study for continuous progress of the current and future studies. And for the last part of the chapter 1, the scope and the limitations of the study. This study is all about the perception of teachers and students in science experimental based subjects during COVID-19 pandemic. And this study will be conducted through survey and via Messenger Google Form. The target respondents of this study are randomly selected students and teachers of Western Philippines University, Puerto Princesa City, Aborlan, and Quezon campus. And the study will commence on the second semester of the school year 2021 and 2022. And hopefully, be finished by the first semester of the school year 2022 and 2023.
Okay, now I will be discussing to you the chapter 2 that covers the review of related literature. For the grand synthesis of the review of related literature, the sudden shift of educational process marks the emergence of online method of delivery of teaching in science. Teachers and students are the most affected individuals when it comes to implementing the continuation of education. In these scenarios, both teachers and students inevitably speak out in their perceptions about the sudden shift of traditional method of delivery of learning into a technologically integrated one. Researchers, as curiosity paved the way to find out the perceptions of teachers and students, conducted various studies to find out the perception of teachers and students about science experimental based subjects. In search of many literatures regarding the perception of teachers and students about science experimental based subjects, there are commonly found results on finding from studies of various published online literatures. Perception of teachers and students in science experimental based subjects could be reflected on the gamified flipped learning method, on students' innovation skills, self-efficacy towards virtual physics lab course, and perceptions. In research findings of Ahmed HD and Asik Soiji 2021 revealed that the GFL technique had a favorable influence on students' creativity skills, despite the fact that gamified flipped learning had a negligible impact on students' self-efficacy. Furthermore, the student interviews demonstrated a good opinion of gamification by noting several crucial components of the process that were particularly valuable. There are commonly found perception of teachers and students when it comes to science experimental based subjects from various literatures and studies. One of that is the preferences of teachers and students in science experimental classes. Students tend to be more interested in traditional way of learning, science, the same thing for teachers. There are students who prefer online class because they got complete gadgets to sustain their online classes and for the convenience purposes. In the case of teachers, older ones tend to have preferred the traditional way of teaching science-based subjects, including personal or actual experiments and activities in science. Younger science teachers have adopted distant or online science teaching. They also prefer personal or traditional method of teaching science, experimental based subjects. Generally, teachers and students' perceptions about science experimental based subjects may vary or may be the same in some point. There is about this problem, and that's the teacher and students' need for learning. Whatever it is, teachers would still teach and learners will still learn even the most difficult times. Now I will present to you the theoretical framework. This study has its basis on Richard E. Mayer, John Sweller, and Roxana Moreno's e-learning theory. This e-learning theory emphasizes the cognitive science principles of effective multimedia learning using e-learning technology. Cognitive research and technology suggest that selecting appropriate concurrent multimedia modalities as well as applying a number of other principles may improve learning. Commencing with cognitive theory as one's empowering science-based premise, research teams such as Richard E. Mayer, John Sweller, and Roxana Moriano established a set of multimedia instructional design principles that promote effective learning within the scientific literature. Many of these principles have been field tested in everyday learning settings and found to be more effective there as well. Relative to this theory is a focus of our study, finding out the perception of teachers and students in science experimental-based subjects during COVID-19 pandemic. E-learning theory fits our study. E-learning experiences may continue to answering the question about the perception of teachers and students in science experimental-based subjects during COVID-19. For the conceptual framework, the paradigm has three frames. The first frame will show the independent variable that will be the demographic profile of the teachers and students in terms of their names, sex, age, civil status, position, monthly salary, years in service, ISP or the Internet Service Provider, family monthly income, and incomes. The second frame represents the intervening variable that presents the COVID-19 pandemic. The third frame is the dependent variable that shows the perception of teachers and students in science experimental based subjects. So this figure shows the research paradigm of the study. For the independent variable, it represents a profile of the teachers and students, name, sex, age, civil status, position, monthly salary, years of service, ISP, family monthly income, campus, and gadget. For the intervening variable, COVID-19 pandemic, and for the dependent variable, teachers and students' perception in science experimental based subjects.
Now I'm going to present the chapter 3, which is the methodology. Under the methodology, we have the local of the study. This study will be conducted in College of Education at Western Philippines University, Puerto Princesa City, Aberlan, and Quezon campus. Research design. This research will use a descriptive research method. The main goal of this research is to describe the future data of the perception of teachers and students in science experimental-based subjects during COVID-19 pandemic. The intention behind this type of research is principally done where researchers want to possess a better understanding of a topic. Respondents of the study and sampling procedure. The respondents of this study will be the science major students and teachers of the College of Education at Western Philippines University, Puerto Princesa City, Aberlan, and Quezon campus. This research will require permission to dean or the head of the school department to conduct this study. Each respondent will be given the same questionnaire to answer with utmost honesty and sincerity. The data to be gathered among the respondents will be presented into descriptive, tabular, and further analysis on the response will be made. For the instrumentation of the study, the researchers will use questionnaire as the research instrument to gather data from the respondent. The questionnaire will compose the open-ended question scale to determine the perception of teachers and students in science experimental-based subjects during COVID-19 pandemic. Data gathering procedure. The researchers will send a letter of permission to the Dean of the College of Education at Western Philippines University. The questionnaires will be sent to the respondent through Messenger or a Google form. The researchers will tabulate the data from the questionnaires. The researchers will then analyze and evaluate the data gathered. The conclusion will be given once the data are interpreted. For the statistical treatment of the data, this study will use different descriptive statistical tools to analyze the information gathered. The frequency counts, percentile rank, mean, and average mean will be used to analyze the data. These descriptive measures were essential in understanding the quantitative data. To determine the perception of teachers and students in science experimental-based subject during COVID-19 pandemic.
And after you are introduced to the content of the research, let us now proceed to the questionnaires. First, we have the socio-demographic profile of the teachers. That includes their name, sex, age, civil status, ISP or the Internet Service Provider, position, monthly salary, years in service, and the gadget. And these are the questions that we'll ask to the teachers. We have 5 questions for the delivery, and they will rate this as strongly agree, undecided, disagree, and strongly disagree. They will put check in each item that displayed the following traits and behavior using the scale mentioned earlier. And we also have 5 questions for the process and discussion for teachers.
Under evaluation, we also have 5 questions for the teachers. After the teacher's socio-demographic profile, we have the students. That includes their name, sex, age, civil status, ISP or the Internet Service Provider, family monthly salary, campus, GWA or General Weighted Average, and the gadget that they will be using. Same instruction as for the teacher earlier, we have the 5 questions for the delivery for students, and they will write this as strongly agree, undecided, disagree, and strongly disagree, and they will put check in each item that displayed the following traits and behavior using the mentioned scale earlier. 5 questions as well for the process and discussion for students. And lastly, we have the evaluation that have 5 questions as well for the students.